All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Off Axis podcast. I'm here with Ben Lerman. Ben, where are you from and how you doing?
Hey, I'm good, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course.
I live in Las Vegas now. I'm originally from a little town called Prescott, Arizona.
Oh, Prescott, right?
Yep.
How is it growing up there? Is it super hot?
No, actually, so it's Prescott's in northern Arizona, so it's kind of like mountain town.
Okay,
had,
kind of like Sedona?
It's a little bit like Sedona. It has all the seasons. It was very like picturesque. Like leaves would change in the fall and snow in the winter. It's a little bigger now, but when I was growing up, it was kind of a small town blocked off from the rest of the world.
Yeah, we were just in Sedona like 2 weeks ago, and it was totally not what I picture of Arizona. Like I've only been to like Tempe and like Phoenix, and it was always like straight desert, super hot. But then Sedona was beautiful. Haven't been to Prescott though.
Prescott, yes. Sedona is really nice. And it's like its own little world. Arizona is really interesting because you can almost find any climate anywhere you go.
Yeah.
So like up in northern Arizona, you've got like huge forests in the Grand Canyon, and then you go a little further south, and it's more like kind of looks like you're near the East Coast, and then of course you get to the south, and it's what everybody thinks of with all the desert and the cactus and everything like that. So.
For sure. Bring the mic a little closer towards you. Yeah.
I need to work on my enunciation too. I think I talk quietly.
Yeah, just talk louder than you think you should.
Yeah, just talk obnoxiously loud. All right.
Yeah, so you like it in Vegas so far?
Yeah, man. I came out here because it had everything that I was looking for as far as the industry and the people and the things that were going on. Obviously, there's been a little bit of a shift now, so it's kind of a totally different environment, and I'm actually looking at it and saying, okay, well, is this place still a good place to be? Does it still offer the same things?
Yeah.
So that's been an interesting perspective change for sure. But I've been out here the past about 10 years, and I mean, I've loved it.
Yeah.
It's a great place. So.
Yeah, definitely kind of feeling the same way. Like, should I be in Vegas? Like, because I came from LA, and it was just so expensive, and obviously I couldn't do what I have in the backyard in LA without paying like $250,000 or something for it, like crazy. But so what was your background before you started performing?
Yeah, man. So
was it like team sports or like gymnastics?
Yeah, you would think. Excuse me. No, actually, I had kind of a weird entrance into the industry. I had really no formal introduction to it at all. The town that I grew up in, like I said, pretty small. We had a gymnastics team, but I wasn't super athletic as a kid, so I didn't really know much about it or anything like that. If I could go back, I would have loved to have done that.
Yeah, me too.
But I had some background in martial arts. Like I was really into like kung fu when I was a kid.
Okay.
And I had I would take classes at like the local dojos or whatever. But the quality of training wasn't particularly high or anything. I had one teacher who was really good. But my first introduction into anything like that physical was with martial arts. And then I actually didn't find out about Circus until I was out of high school, and I came to Vegas for like a vacation with a friend, and we happened to know someone who was in the industry, and I was able to kind of learn about it and start there. So I got a really late start.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah, which it's funny. I actually run into a lot of people like that, and I think it was good because had I been exposed to it when I was younger, I might not have been as focused on it.
You might burn out.
Yeah, but since it was like I was sort of an adult and I could choose how to spend my time, I chose to spend pretty much all of my time on that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Me too. You would think that, like, I've seen you do handstands and stuff. I'm like, damn, that's got to be like lifelong practice.
It feels like it. I mean, I'm 33 now, and I started when I was 18, and to be honest, I've only started being competent the past few years, so it gives you an idea of the time frame on that. But handstands are a really unique thing. I think it has a slower, for me at least, a much slower learning curve. Like I picked up other things way faster. But the handstand just took forever. So this is part of the.
I believe you. I cannot do a handstand for my life.
It's okay. I can't flip for shit. So
yeah. Unfortunately, we didn't practice handstands or stretching in the skate park.
Yeah. Is that your background is mainly skating?
It's all skate park. I did like team sports like wrestling and baseball and stuff when I was growing up.
Okay. Cool.
But I've always went to the skate park. My mom hated it. She absolutely hated it because we would essentially go to the skate park until we couldn't walk anymore. We'd fall so many times.
Yeah.
Looking back, I'm like, why did I do that? But
Right.
I mean, it got me where I am right now. And like, it was just super random. When MySpace came out, I saw that there was like a scooter competition. I was like, oh, I have to go to that. Like, I ride scooters like I have one. And then I ended up going. It was around 2005 or so, and there's this huge like scooter competition. I was like, "What the hell?" I thought I was like the only person who took this seriously.
Right.
So that just I actually got first place, and that turned into kind of a career from there. Totally by accident. Like if I would have thought that I'd be performing later in life, like performing as an artist never crossed my mind, not once.
Yeah, I actually really wanted to be a skater when I was a kid. Like I had boards and I tried, but I was not athletic. I was not coordinated, and I honestly was like too scared to try the hard shit. So I always admired those kids who just like went all in.
Yeah.
So that's super cool. I hung out with all the skaters, and I definitely tried to keep up with them, but I never could. So
Yeah, it's great. Definitely like you got to be a little crazy in the head. Yeah. Like you usually take your first fall and you slam on the concrete, and it's either do I keep going and try it again, or like do I leave? And that's kind of like you're either one of those crazy people or you're not.
Yeah, but I mean I think I learned that later. That's life is like that, right? Like if you want to do anything, you have to be willing to take those hits at first, because nobody just like gets on a skateboard and suddenly is fucking amazing. Like it just doesn't work that way, Or maybe there's that one kid that does, but like they're the exception to the rule. So,
yeah, for sure. So on that note, do you think, like, let's say we have like a 12-year-old watching this, do you think circus artists should go to school? Because there's circus schools. They're not really in America. There's a couple, but I feel like in like Quebec, in that area, it's really popular that people go to circus school and then they essentially go to school to get a job in Cirque du Soleil later. Do you think that's necessary, or do you think it's kind of like that burnout factor?
I really think it's circumstantial. I mean, I didn't go to any sort of traditional circus school. Sometimes I wish I had, because I had to really fight to find the good teachers and the information that actually worked. But I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. One thing I would say is, if you have access to people who know that world and have actually, proven sort of a successful method, right? If you can find someone who went through Cirque school, knows the right teachers, knows the places to go, and actually had a successful career or is currently having a successful career as a result of that, I would say you could potentially try to emulate and do what they did, and I think you would probably get a lot of quality information out of it. But I don't think it's necessary in order to build a career. I think what traditional circus school can give you is it will give you, access. It'll help you with your skill set, right? It'll allow you to build a very, very strong skill set. The issue is, at least the way that I've seen it from my perspective on the industry, is that's only half the battle.
Yeah.
If you don't know anything about even you probably don't even have to know, but like if you don't have the additional skills of understanding the business and understanding people and understanding marketing and all of those things, then even if you're really talented, you're actually at a disadvantage, because there's a lot of talent out there, right? And at the end of the day, the things that determine the success of someone over a long period of time isn't just purely the quality of what they're bringing to the table. It's all these other factors that I think they don't teach in school.
Yeah.
And those are the things that you really only learn from jumping on the skateboard and eating shit.
Yeah, real life
times,
experience. Yeah, so it looks like just based on Google search, it says it's about 4,500 per year. I wonder if you can like take this to like a normal job and be like, oh, I have a bachelor's in circus.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean,
or is it just strictly you're going to circus, and if you don't make it in circus, it does not work out for you?
That's just it. I mean, the closest the closest comparison that I have is I almost went to art school. So I'm also an artist. I do visual art.
Oh, so is my fiance.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
she went to art school.
And I got very, very close. And art school was really expensive, right? It was like $200,000 a year or something. And they did such a good sales job of convincing me that that was like the path, that I almost went and did it. But I ended up deciding not to, right? And just working and using my work experience to build those same credentials. And I feel like in the areas that I do that stuff in, I think I've gotten jobs that other people have applied for who
Yeah.
have a ton of school in their back pocket, and they got looked over just because they didn't have the experience, So it's a balance. Like, you can spend 10 years learning how to do something, or you can spend 10 years doing something.
Yeah.
And what's gonna be more valuable for you at the end of those
Yeah,
10 years.
I definitely took that like approach on life too. But when you do see people who went to circus school, they're like phenomenal on stage. Like, I don't know, do you know who Oval is from Canada?
It sounds so familiar. What are they? What's
They do like mostly theme park shows and stuff.
Oh,
I performed
okay,
for them this last summer, just kind of filling in for someone in the high dive show.
Nice.
And they had another show that was all indoors, and the artists, like, they picked their artists straight from the circus school, and dude, they are so good.
Yeah, I don't think there's any denying that if you get the right teachers, whether it's in circus school or privately, it's going to affect the quality of what you're able to bring to the table, and that's a huge component.
Yeah.
I'm not against it. Like, I think if I had known more about it earlier and I was able to get in earlier, I probably would have tried to pursue that route.
Yeah.
It just, by the time I got around to deciding this is what I want to do with my life, it didn't make any sense, because I would have had to. It like, the logistics of it didn't add up. It was like, I'm gonna have more success if I just sort of dive in using the resources in my immediate surroundings than trying to move my whole life to Quebec or to Russia.
Yeah.
One thing I was talking to, Dima, right? Dima Shine.
I don't think so.
He has the Shine Alternative Fitness here in town. He was.
I know what that is, cause
Yeah. So he's he was the hand balancer in Zumanity for a long time, and now he's over at the Celestia at Stratosphere. And he was saying to me, the one advantage of circus school, because he went to the one in Kiev, I think, in Russia, is that it builds out, the infrastructure and the time is actually there to really focus on what you need to focus on.
Yeah.
And unless you're someone who's really good at blocking out all of the distractions of life and like creating your own schedule and sticking to it, the demands of daily life just become too distracting. So I think it's also like, you have to know yourself, right? Like, I've always been good at getting hyper focused on the thing and just sort of, maybe even to my own detriment, ignoring anything else that was coming in.
Yeah, me too.
So I knew that I had that ability, but if you're someone that's like needs structure to get something done, then of course, like, school's going to be a way easier path to that.
Yeah. I've always had like that drive to like go and push myself and work for free and do that kind of stuff. And I always tell people like, oh, you can do it too. And then like they don't. And I'm like, I guess some people just kind of need some structure in their life.
Yeah, I think it's context. I don't think there's like a perfect plan for anyone. I think it's more about self-awareness and just like understanding like, what environments do I actually thrive in,
Yeah.
And what you really want. Like, I think I always wonder what I look like to other performers or other people in the industry, and I'm sure it's on both ends of the spectrum. But like, one thing that I've come to understand about myself is I wanted to be part of this community, but I never had the drive to be like the best performer or like the star performer. For me, I was also interested in so many other facets. Like, I loved the creation side of it. I loved the idea of like directing shows. I loved the idea of building, because I also have an entertainment company, right? So I loved the idea of building, the systems and the infrastructure that allow the really talented people to come in and do their thing. And I think I recognize that, like, I'm competent, but I'm not at that insanely high level. But I think part of that's also because that wasn't the vision that I had for my life. It was more about creating things, that added to this whole industry that I really cared about. I don't remember exactly where I was going with that, but
that actually leads perfectly into what I want to talk to next, because you have a production company, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And like, what was the moment where you thought, I could be more than just a performer? Or have you always, like, do you have like a background in business at all?
No, again, it was one of those things where I jumped into it, understanding that I would learn what I needed to learn along the way. The entertainment company, it actually kind of came to me. I got an Instagram message from someone who was putting a show together at Mandalay Bay, someone out there had told this person that I was the person to get in touch with in order to find performers, and they wanted some Cirque style entertainment for their kind of like opening ceremony.
Okay.
It was cool. It was for a cheer and tumbling convention, and so they wanted something that was like similar but different to open up the show. And I still don't know to this day. I have no idea who recommended me. So whoever you are out there, thank you. And at the time I was just struggling trying to perform anywhere I could. I didn't even think about that next level of trying to do something like have a company. But somehow when they asked that question, instead of me being like, no, I don't think so, I was like, I mean, yeah, I guess technically I could do that. And I figured, I didn't even hire myself. I just went and found like my best, the three friends that I had that were the best at what they did. And I was like, hey, I think I might have work for you, and honestly just kind of bullshitted the rest.
Yeah.
But after I did that, I realized that like, I really like doing that, because one thing that I'm not so great at, or I'm better at it now, but I wasn't great at promoting myself. But I was always good at advocating for the people that I knew. And so like, as a performer, that's actually one thing that I recommend is like find someone who is down to promote you, because it's so much easier to talk about how great someone else is than to try to talk about how great you are. And if you're a freelance performer and or like a solopreneur or whatever you call it, you have to figure out how to get people aware of what you do without coming across as like, just look at me, and that can
definitely
be helpful if you have another person advocating on your behalf.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I got kind of lucky in same kind of situation. I performed since 2010. I started my company in 2017, and I always was sitting there during rehearsals like, oh, I could do that. I could do this. I could do everything that they're doing. And then eventually it got to the point where I was doing everything on the stage, and I was like, I think I'm working a little, like getting overworked. And then I had a YouTube channel, which I just started, had a video called Choreographing a Tramp Ball Routine. Fortunately, Nickelodeon Googled choreograph tramp ball, because that's
cool.
what they wanted for a show.
Yeah.
And then they hit me up, and I was like, should I do this myself or should I give it to someone else?
Right.
And I was like, this could be my chance. I was like, yeah, we have a show company, blah, blah, blah. Just totally bullshit my way into it. And that's essentially how I got started in this whole thing.
Yeah, I think there are opportunities that get thrown at us that are chances to move in the directions we want to move in life all the time. Probably all day, every day. It's just there's only a few distinct times that you're receptive to them and you're able to like actually move on them, so it's almost like it's not like you're lucky or you're not lucky. It's like you're lucky all day long. It's just whether or not you're smart enough to like recognize it and then take that step when the time makes sense.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is success is where preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
And it's like you just got to prepare yourself, and I always have said yes to everything. In fact, like my parents or my dad got mad at me recently because he's like, why'd you say yes to this? You don't have one of these. I'm like, no, it was a teeter board show. I'm like, well, I say yes to everything and I figure it out later.
Yeah, no, I do the same thing. And that also is a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
Because when it works out great. And when it doesn't, you kind of have to eat crow and be like, you know what? I bit off more than I could chew. But I spend a lot of time in my free time studying other people in all sorts of industries, but just success stories across the board, whether it's business or the arts or entertainment. And I mean, one common denominator that I've found is like, that's it. The people who really get where they want to go, they're not afraid to mess up. And because they're not afraid to mess up, they try things. And the more you do something, it's so cliche, but the more you do something, the better you get at it. But you can't do something if you're not trying, Yeah,
definitely.
So I've definitely gotten the criticism of like, you're all over the place, you do too much, but it's like, yeah, but it's the the ROI on that is worth it. And obviously I try to be able to deliver on my commitments and stuff, and I try to be very quick. Like if I think I can't do something, just tell people like, hey, I got in over my head. I'm not going to be able to deliver on this. But yeah, it's a perspective. And I don't know if everybody, as many other people act in that way,
Yeah. Yeah, I think just being as well-rounded as possible is always like a good thing, especially if you want to be in business. You got like the ultimate CEO is someone who knows how to do every single part of the business. Because if you don't, like, you could hire someone who is like completely ignorant to what they know how to do, and like you have no idea because you don't understand what they're doing. Like, let's say I hire a lighting person, I have no idea about lighting, which I don't.
Yep.
Like, I could get whatever they give me, and I would have no idea. Like, oh yeah, that looks good.
Yeah.
But if I know just a little bit, I can understand like what they're doing. And you kind of got to know the whole aspect of it, whether it's marketing, sales, performing, choreographing, lighting, sound. Like, you got to know kind of everything, especially if you want to have a good show.
Yeah, I feel like you have to be willing to educate yourself enough that you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You know, like, you don't have to be the best at it because there are people who are, but it's going to be hard to tell who really is the best at something if you don't understand like the language of it and the logistics, you know, to a decent extent, you know. So yeah, I've probably spent way too much time educating myself on things that I'll never actually use, only for the sake of, well, someday I might have to hire someone to do this.
Yeah.
I want to know what the heck I'm talking about, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
I feel that. So what are your predictions on when we can do shows again?
Man,
it's so in the air. Like, I had
tomorrow, please. No.
I had a whole tour booked, and it was just gone, and it's like $50,000, just poof.
This has been one of the most interesting experiences in my career, because this is the first time that I've lost out on a big deal where it wasn't directly my fault. Right? Not, you know what I'm saying? Like, because I've made mistakes and had things go away, but never has it been like the same thing. Everything's lined up. You're doing your job. You're doing it to the best of your abilities, and it just is gone.
Yeah.
But I think two things are going to happen. One is you're going to see an emergence of a completely new, or multiple new brands of entertainment and ways that things are presented. Right? Online, I think the visual experience on the internet just got bumped ahead 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah.
I think we're going to see innovations in VR tech and stuff that's going to allow people who do live performances to give similar quality presentations right from someone's home.
Yeah.
Right? The other thing that I'm seeing right now is what we were talking about before, is the drive-up model is coming back, right? Like, the very first thing that opened back up was the drive-in theater.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting, right? And so I think all of a sudden people are saying or seeing that, oh, that's a model for live entertainment that we didn't even consider before because we thought of it as sort of antiquated, but actually it's really practical. If you don't have to get out of your car, if you just drive up to something, sit there, and you get the show, it's almost a more personalized experience because you're in the comfort of your own car. You can bring your own food, you can do whatever you want. You know, there's no reason they couldn't have people coming up to the windows and serving you stuff. So I think even if the venues are closed for a longer amount of time, we're going to start seeing opportunities to perform through different structures.
Yeah.
As far as the venues and everything go, I mean, I keep a pretty close eye on it because it affects my business directly. Everything I'm seeing right now is like August, September, you know, and that's contingent on there not being this second flare up and all of that. So, you know, when I hear about something being that far off, I just turn my attention to like, how can I pivot right now? You know, assuming it could be another 6 months or another year before things are really back to where they were.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm more thinking in terms of, well, what can I fill that 6 months to a year with that's going to prepare me even better for when that does open up, and of course, keep me floating until then. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, definitely, because who knows when we're going to be able to sit in a theater next to each other and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. But there could be, like I said, you know, different things pop up within the next year that don't require that type of a setup, you know?
Yeah, it could be a good thing for circus artists who have just been in with Cirque for a really long time, and I've always said, like, that's a dead-end job. Like, you're not even building your name by working for that company. You're essentially, it's like a temporary job, and if something goes wrong, that's the end, and you have to figure out a new career after that. Like, if you're smart, you figure out a career while you have money coming in, and you don't have to be like, stressed. Like I started my business when I had no shows or anything going on, so it was really tough for me. I had to do like Postmates and all this other stuff to like basically fund my business. But if you had like a 9-to-5 job, essentially like Cirque du Soleil or something, you have enough money to where you're chilling and you can like start a business on the side or do whatever you want, because you can't just perform forever.
Yeah.
Around 50 or so, that's when your body's going to stop working, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few unicorns out there that pull it off. But it's also a question of, do you want to be doing that?
Yeah.
You know, like for me, it was always like, I want to experience other facets of this industry and other industries. I was always really interested in business. So that's actually kind of what I did. I was working at Circus for a while, and I was taking most of that money and funneling it into the entertainment company at the time. Now, if somebody had told me that the entire entertainment industry was going to disappear in 2 years, I might have picked a different business.
Me too.
But I was staggering it because I had heard and read that's and I think it's true. You know, that it's almost like have one practical job and have one impractical job, and they sort of balance each other out, because the markets still fluctuate even when everything's turning. But yeah, now I'm even thinking of it like, you know, when in investing, they talk about diversification all the time. And I think in business, this especially was like a real wake-up call. Like, you have to be diversified in your businesses as well.
Yep.
Like, and think of it in terms of full market. Like, if this entire industry shut down tomorrow, what would you do? Right? And one of the coolest things is that we do live in the age of the internet, which is basically a second economy that exists almost separately from anything that's going on in the real world.
Yeah.
Like, obviously there are things that are being affected, but look at Amazon, man. Like, the companies that were fully automated and online are actually doing better now than they were before this.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no reason that an individual business owner or person couldn't create a second system that works the same way. And so then they have a little bit of a safety blanket, whether it's the entire industry collapses or they get injured and they have to take 6 months or a year off. You know, that's another thing that I was lucky in that the first 5 years of my career, I spent 3 of those years injured, and realized very quickly, like, you know, you can have all the willpower in the world, but a broken leg is a broken leg, and you just gotta, you know, you're gonna have to roll with that sometimes. So yeah, I think diversification, both as a business or just as an individual, having those fallbacks, you know, and when things are working, lean into it. You know, like when the entertainment industry is rolling, like, I'm putting most of my energy into that, but I'm also keeping other things going just a little bit in the background.
Yeah, definitely. Like, fortunately, I never thought of myself as being an artist, and like I wanted to be a personal trainer before I got my first show job.
Gotcha.
So then as soon as I finished my first summer of shows, like, oh, cool, I'm gonna now have money to pay for this classes, and I got into personal training for a few years, and then I worked for Razor, which was like my big sponsor in scootering, and that was like essentially going to school for me. So I got really lucky by working with a bunch of really successful like business people. Like, they straight up told me, like, you should literally start working on your career right now, because you could have a bad injury and you could not have anything to do. And the money's just going to disappear. So like, fortunately, I actually read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I don't know if you've read that book.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite books.
And that changed my life, and I was like, maybe I should actually quit Razor and start my own business. Get this while I have some money in the bank.
Yeah. I mean, I think I constantly have this battle in my head of that super practical. Although even Robert Kiyosaki says, you know, have a job that pays for your career, right? And so I think there is this nice balance of that practical thing that supports the impractical thing, because there are people who are very, very successful at the impractical thing. But most of them, and most people don't look deep enough to realize that it was a practical thing that got them there. Like, I think a great example is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Speaking of personal training, I don't know, a lot of people I think don't know this, but he actually had a masonry company in L.A.
Yeah, he did.
And he was very very good at business, and he ran that, and he used that money to fund his acting. And this was even when he was already pretty well known. He was already a bodybuilder. He already had that notoriety and, you know, championships, but he still had something very, basic, straightforward to make sure that he could afford to put all of his time into the acting. And if you look at the history of really successful people, I think you're going to see a lot more of that than just the person who puts everything into their hopes and dreams. I mean, you still are. It's just like at the end of the day, you can move forward so much more easily when you can fund your own ideas.
Yep.
Right? Because as soon as that money runs out, it's like you're just stuck and you're just sitting there and you can't breathe.
Yeah, that moves into the next topic I wanted to talk about,
Oh,
managing money. This has actually flowed perfectly with my list.
Nice.
So managing money as an artist, I feel like a lot of people don't understand how taxes work in business and that kind of stuff. And essentially, if you're an artist, you have your own business. And a lot of people don't buy their own equipment and that kind of stuff. Like, if you're an aerialist, you should have an aerial rig.
Right.
If you're a Chinese pole artist, you should have a Chinese pole. Because if I want to hire someone, I can't just hire a Chinese pole artist that doesn't have a pole, because then I have to go through and rent a pole from someone. And it's like, not only is that like a tax write-off by investing into your own equipment, it's it's way more profitable, and you can just take that chunk of money, and I can almost guarantee you will eventually, if you're a successful artist, you're going to pay off your own equipment really quickly.
Yeah. I'm sort of I'm a cautionary tale, that despite my resistance to it, did have to learn, and I'm still learning how to be good with that kind of stuff. But one of the good decisions that I made early on was when I started the company, I immediately went and did the research, and I got a business license. And I was so uneducated about it at the time. I actually set up the wrong type of business structure the first time around and ended up wasting quite a lot of money, probably $4,000 or $5,000.
What did you set up the first time?
Well, so initially I was trying to set it up as a corporation, because
Okay.
my thought was, if this expands quickly, I want some big umbrella thing that I can hold multiple companies under. What I didn't understand at the time, just because I hadn't spent the time to really research it, was that it's just not necessary, right? You can have an LLC, and that pretty much does the same thing as a corporation, which run, and just the expense of the setup. Like, an LLC is a couple $100s to set up, but to set up a corporation is thousands, and then there's all of the follow-up logistics that also cost money. And I think it was more ego. I was just like, I want to be able to say that I have a corporation. So I went, and I was making good money at the time, so I just did it. And then came back around to find out that it's also more expensive to run a corporation.
Definitely.
So, like, I wasn't running lean at all on a company that was barely getting started, was barely growing, right? So then I just had to, what do they call it? Disassemble that, and I just set up a basic LLC. And I ran it really lean, ran everything through 1099s and all of that. But there are a lot of benefits and payoffs down the road of having that business license and getting all of your license and insurance stuff in line. Like, when I run into a performer that doesn't have basic performing insurance,
Yep.
I'm kind of like, look, yeah, I get it. It's $200. That feels like a lot of money, but understand that, like, that is a doorway to, that's the difference between working on Fremont and, like, working for yourself in, the biggest venues in the world.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially if the people hiring you are from the corporate world, like, if you don't get them that COI within a day or two, you're never going to hear from them again, because it's like they don't care. Like, it's not their problem.
Yeah, for sure. And, like, I don't hire people all the time if they don't have the coverage, because, like, I don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
And, like, if they don't have it, it's like, I guess you're not really taking this too seriously.
So, something that I did start doing early on, though, because I also recognize from my own experience, is like, sometimes people aren't doing it because they're lazy. Sometimes it's just because they're not educated. They don't understand the whole thing. So what I would do is I would say, hey, like, I'll book you for this gig, but this amount of money is going towards your insurance.
Yeah.
And then once it's set up for them, then they can use it. They have that, and then I can hire them again, and I know that it's legit, and I don't have to worry about it. So, I think that's a big part of it too, being willing to take those little, because part of the company is also, I'm sort of an agent, right? So it's like I'm also getting paid to know that stuff and be able to advocate on behalf of the performer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, essentially we are kind of agents, especially when you come to like jobs that we're not actually performing. We're essentially just an agent.
Yeah.
Maybe doing some choreography too.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. An entertainment, and it's something that I think people don't realize. Like an entertainment company, it really you're just a glorified agent. You're outsourcing everything unless you own, all of the equipment and the facilities and the lighting and everything. Everything's outsourced. You're just a professional organizer, and so at that point, your job is to be good at organizing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's totally what it is.
Yeah.
And I find myself I'm like, oh, we need a teeter board. All right, let's build a teeter board.
Yeah.
All right, we need ramps. Fuck it, let's build ramps.
Right, and then also being willing to see those investments and just before this whole thing happened, I was putting a lot of money into building a bunch of new props, and I think a lot of people, not even props that I would use personally, but things like I know if I have this prop, I understand the industry well enough that like if I have this thing, I can book it, and then I can hire one of the 10 people that I know who could use it, and it's funny because of those 10 people, none of them have that prop, right?
Yep.
Whereas, so if you are an individual performer and you're like, why am I not getting any work? It's like, look at your presentation. If you're offering the same thing as the other 10 people in town or in the country that do this thing, you have no value add. It's like it's a 1 in 10 chance that you'll get hired, and then it's just about who knows the hiring person best, right?
Yep.
If you actually create something that is unique, but also what the market actually wants, not just what you want. I think that's where there's a lot of conflict also with people who are using their own personal creations and trying to make money off of it, because we all have our own ideas of what we want to create. But unless you have angel funding to do that, if you're trying to use your creations to build your, ideas, like there's a little bit of a give and take. Like at first you have to make the things that people want in order to accumulate enough money to build the thing that you want, or to have the time to make the thing that you want.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What would you say is like a good way that artists can book more work? Like, is there an easy step that someone watching this can just take and like, oh, that's what I should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to really think in terms of branching out. I mean, if you're not set up on like the 10 basic performer sourcing sites
like Gig Masters, Gig Salad.
What's that? It's funny, I just found
World Industries,
World
Entertainment. Yeah,
I don't like those guys so much, but
I've
yeah,
never booked anything with them.
Yeah, they're kind of spammy. But in Vegas, there's Vegas auditions, and the thing is not just so you can directly get the auditions and stuff from there, but it keeps you in touch with what's going on, right? So it's most of the biggest gigs that I've ever gotten have just been because somebody said, hey, this thing is happening, but the reason I went was because I understood enough of what was going on peripherally to be like, oh, I actually have a chance of getting this thing, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So if you don't kind of have your finger on the pulse of what's going on, then you won't really know what's a good opportunity and what isn't. And I'd say the second thing is, don't be afraid to invest in adding value to what it is you have. And actually, this is something that I had to really come to terms with when I was starting out is, do you know Brandon Burchard? Do you know this guy?
Brandon, yeah, diver.
No. He's a there's a Brandon diver. That's funny. No. He's like a motivational speaker guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, he has this whole thing about adding value as an individual, as a business person, and how if you need to grow, you have to always focus on adding value. And so the way I look at it with performers is there's 3 tiers of adding value, right? The first one is your skill set. Like you have to be self-aware enough and be willing to ask the questions like, am I good enough? Am I as good as the people I'm trying to compete with? And if the answer is no, then what you need to be doing isn't putting money into props or into an agent or anything. You need to be building your skill set. You need to go to circus school. You need to train more. You need to find good teachers. You need to be willing to say, hey, maybe the way I've been doing this isn't working, or just realize it just might be a time thing, right? Like,
yeah.
I think people don't realize how long it takes to develop some of these skills. So if you don't feel like you're keeping up with the other people in the industry, like ask, how long have you been doing this? Oh, 10 years? Well, I've been doing it 6 months. Of course you're going to be better, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing is the skill, add value skill. The next thing is the presentation, right? So if you feel like I'm good, but I'm still not getting, and like you're honest about that, but I'm still not getting the work, well, now it's time to look at the presentation. That's where you invest in the props, the costume, the lighting, the music, whatever. Like create something that is a little higher level maybe than what you have right now.
Yeah.
And then if you've done those two things and you still aren't getting work, then it's the promotion and the marketing.
Marketing, yeah.
That means you have what you need, but nobody knows that you're there. So that's when it's time to get an agent, And the thing that first off, I almost recommend every performer to become an agent so that they just understand how that works. Because once you've done it for someone else, you know how to do it for yourself 10 times better.
Yep.
Right? Because I could go and hire almost anyone and give them a list of 20 things to do to go promote me, and I'm pretty confident that I would get work out of that, right? And that could be a person that has no experience with the industry. But because I understand how the industry works, and it's just a matter of like putting in the time and reaching out to people and sending the promo material to the right people, you know that there's going to be some residual from that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And like social media and all that stuff is really good for marketing. Like I have spent so much time on my YouTube channel. I don't make a lot of money off of it, but the amount of work that I've gotten from my YouTube channel pays itself off.
And it's free. I mean, that's the people who are like, oh, I don't want to be on social media all day. It's like, okay, but like you realize 10 years ago, you would have had to pay thousands or tens of thousands or
lots of money,
hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that same exposure. Whereas if you're willing to just put in the time and you're strategic about it, because you can learn how to do it for free and you can do it for free. So the only component is time. And then if you're still not moving fast enough, you can hire people for pretty inexpensive to help you with it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunities. Now, all of that, of course, is predicated on the industry existing. Yeah. So this is really interesting. But I also think that what we're going to see right now is the people who succeed in this industry are the ones who are going to start creating their own channels. And the best part of that in my mind is that we're going to start seeing individuals figure out how to present their own act from their living room or from some type of space that is actually on par with what Cirque du Soleil can deliver or what one of these big companies. And that's going to be the restructuring of the industry that actually allows performers to, specifically Cirque performers, to present themselves like other entertainers. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's a big difference between the way that, say, the music industry functions or the film industry to the Cirque industry.
Oh, huge.
Right. So right now, Cirque is sort of like nameless performers performing under a big company, right?
Yep.
But any other industry, it's flipped, right?
Yep.
You have your celebrity entertainer, you have your celebrity musician. There's very few celebrity circus performers, and I just think it's because we've been doing everything off of a very antiquated model that's controlled by, it's kind of top-down mentality.
Huge.
But this is flipping the script, and now it's like, all right, like if you're good and you can put yourself out there, like figure it out, and you're going to build your own brand, your own name, and you're not going to need to rely on an agent, or I mean, you'll have them, but it's going to be you, not what you do, that's getting booked, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And like I hate to say it, but I think Cirque like collapsing or whatever it's doing right now could be a good thing for everyone else, because it's going to spread out the work. It's not going to be you essentially are Cirque du Soleil or no one else.
Right.
Like it gives people the opportunity to book other theaters, and then the people who were working for Cirque were like, oh shit, I actually need to like start working on my own business and this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think, look, I came into this industry because I saw a Cirque show and I fell in love with it. Right. So I will never speak poorly about the quality of what Cirque was able to bring to the table. And I think it genuinely did a lot of good, especially in the beginning. It got me to think about what was possible. Like, so my upbringing, for whatever reason, I was so separated from that stuff that I actually didn't know that a one-arm handstand was like a real thing. Like I thought it was something that people did in movies, because the only time I'd ever seen it was Star Wars, right? And like he was obviously attached to strings in Star Wars, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever watched that scene recently, but it's so bad. But so imagine this: like you're a kid, you think that as far as you're concerned, the idea of balancing on one arm, for any indefinite length of time is like legitimate magic, and then you go and you see someone do that, it restructures the entire way.
Yep.
All of a sudden you realize, well, what else do I think isn't possible that actually is, right?
Yeah.
And so it was Cirque that brought that to me the first time I saw someone do that, and it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
So, you know, amazing what they did. What ended up happening is I think it grew into such a big company, and it took over so much, and it started being the thing by which everything else was compared. And at a certain point, that stopped being beneficial for the individual performer because, like you said, it's either Cirque or nothing. Now, ironically, you could actually make more money, from my perspective, outside of Cirque than in.
Yeah, for sure.
But you still didn't get the, you know, the respect or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, look, if I'm booking myself out and getting paid twice as much as the person that Cirque hired and is busting their ass 7 days a week, you know, and broken and all this stuff, like, sorry, but I'm gonna take the alternate option, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And then when Cirque is $900 million in debt, and then they collapse, you still have something after.
Right. And the fact that, you know,
I'm still scratching my head at like, was no one counting like how much money?
Well, so but also they weren't banking on this. So my understanding of their business model, it was twofold. One, the casinos and the show put all of their money into the building of these venues, right? Like these multi-million-dollar stages and everything. I mean, everything, right? So they knew that they weren't going to make that money back for a long time, right? The idea was that after 5 or 10 or however many years of this show running, they'd start turning a really high profit because of the high ticket sales, which I think they sort of made a miscalculation in that, you know, people will, the more saturated that gets, the more aware of what it is that people, you know, the more exposure people have to it, the less unique it seems, and so the less people are willing to pay, the less people want to go to the show. So I think you were seeing ticket sales drop, which for some reason they didn't calculate, and so what ended up happening is their projections of that return were just off, right?
Yeah.
So they weren't making the money back as fast as they needed to. And then this other company bought Cirque, and they had a very different business model. They were very, you know, ROI first. And so what they started doing is, like other companies, they started buying up all the small companies and restructuring and lowering pay. But then what ended up happening is sort of this delusion. Is that the right word? I think you just started seeing sort of a quality drop a little bit, you know, because things just weren't, it wasn't artists running this. It wasn't people with like really strong creative vision. It was just business decisions. And so you just started seeing things. And then I think also what people don't realize is, like, if you're not paying your performers well, what's going to happen is they're not going to perform well.
Yeah.
And even though they'll get through their job, they'll do it, they'll go through the motions. Like, people don't understand, it's a very energetic thing. When you see a person performing at their best, they can be doing the exact same routine as a person performing at 60%, but you feel that difference. And those little things started adding up. So you'd go to a show and you would just kind of feel like, it's like, these people don't feel like they want to be here, you know, because a lot of them didn't. They were being pushed too hard. They weren't making enough money. And they also probably in the back of their minds understood, like, this is a huge risk, right? I don't have a backup plan. Like, if the show pushes me too hard or just decides that they don't like me anymore, like, I'm screwed. So why would I give them everything that I've got, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. And like around when I was like 26 or so and had a few like head injuries, I was like, maybe I should just stop putting it all on the line and start thinking about something else down the line, because this is really dangerous and there is no backup plan if you get severely injured.
Right. And the other side of it is, you know, it's not necessarily the job. And I think this is just a perspective shift. Like, I really believe it is not your company. If you work for a big company, it is not their job to make a backup plan for you. Like, if they do, that's awesome, and be appreciative of that. But, like, it's your job to have your backup plan figured out. That actually, story time. When I was working at Circus, we got let go halfway through our contract with like no explanation, right? They just pulled us in the office, said, we're cutting half the acts. Sorry, you didn't make the cut.
Ooh.
Right? Yeah. And at the time I was very much in that, like, so much of my value and identity was wrapped up in being a performer, right? So that was like this huge crushing blow to my ego. I thought I wasn't working hard enough, I wasn't doing enough, I wasn't good enough. And a few weeks or months later, I was having a conversation with a friend, and they're like, "Oh yeah, didn't you hear about what happened with the entertainment director at Circus? Have you heard about this? What happened?" From my understanding, they had cut this person had cut half of the performers, but not on anyone's. No one told them to do this. They basically just let half the people go and kept collecting our paychecks.
Ooh,
right? Yeah,
that's sketchy.
because there just wasn't any oversight in that department. This person had like way too much control. And it was right there that I realized, like, you cannot rely on a multi-million-dollar business to have your best interest.
Yeah,
in
no.
mind. Like, they just don't care. And, I could have probably gone back and tried to, like, I don't know, sue or something like that. But I was just like, no, like, I'm not going to put any energy towards this system. Like, I'm going to build my own thing. That was when I really dove into my company and just, like I wanted to control that narrative. I didn't need some other thing to be getting all of the credit and then have the ability to just dispose of me at a whim.
Yep. Yeah. That's a huge thing. When you're working for someone else, you're at that risk. Yeah. That's kind of what I've been trying to do lately, is just book my own show completely. I have been doing like a lot of like book a tramp wall act or a ramp act and other shows and stuff, but the majority I'm trying to just do my own thing, and then like my footwear company kind of ties along with that, and it goes marketing like hand in hand. And also at the same time, I'm trying to promote my artists, because I see this like dead end at the end of the tunnel, where a lot of people who are younger don't. So I'm kind of trying to use my show and social media channels and stuff as marketing for my artists, so that way they're not totally screwed if something like this comes around or something. At least they kind of have a following or have been marketed at least appropriately.
Definitely, yeah. It's all diversification, right? Like, as an individual, you just have to have enough little legs that if one gets knocked out from under you, because the other side of it is, it will, right? Like, one of your legs is going to get knocked out at some point, right? So you might as well move forward thinking that, instead of just being very hopeful that never happens. And maybe there are some people out there who haven't had to deal with that, but I don't know of any.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for a minute, so.
Yeah. I've dealt with like a few artists that are like 50 plus and they're still performing and everything's all good, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
I mean, especially once you hit your 30s, you're probably like, I need a backup plan.
Yeah. I also think it has to do with your, like, the diversity of your interests. Like, if that's really all you're interested in doing, and you're happy, it's a happiness factor, right? If you're happy doing it, then awesome. I don't know. I always wanted to explore more than just one avenue. And I think the trade-off of that is, if you do one thing for your entire life, you're going to be really, really good at that one thing.
Yep.
Right? So you get to choose. It's like you can either be pretty damn good at a handful of things, or you can be amazing at one thing. But for me, I never had the attention span to just focus on like one thing all the time.
Yeah, me either. I've always been the guy trying to get good at everything.
Yeah.
It's like I get good enough to do something, I'm like, all right, on to the next thing.
Yeah. I love the idea of the 80-20 principle. You know this, and actually, because we talked about this a little bit before, I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk talk about the 80-20 principle, and I really like the way he put it. He said, look, I put 80% of my energy into the one main thing, but then I leave that 20% of my energy to try new things, to mess around with stuff, to start new businesses, knowing that they may or may not take off. And so I've been adopting that a lot lately, and it's nice because then it's like there's time in your day and in your mind to just like play.
Yeah.
With the intention of trying to create something that's sustainable, but not feeling like if you're not focusing on that one thing, you're wasting your time.
Yeah. Yeah, he also has an analogy that says, I'm not going to be the guy who tries to juggle 3 balls and consistently does that. I'm the guy who throws 9 up in the air and hopefully I catch 5.
Right. Right.
Yeah. That's kind of the way I've treated it too. I have like 5 or 6 different resources for income. Yeah. One fails and on to the next one pretty much.
Yeah. And you the thing is, if you're really doing it, then you learn really quick. It's like, okay, I suck at this and I need to spend more time getting better, or it's not worth the return, so I'm just going to turn my attention away from it, And that's the one I think that's the one downside. We were talking about school. That's the one downside about learning something in a theoretical environment.
Yep.
Right? Like, in real time, you make different decisions than in theory time. Right?
Definitely.
You can sit around all day and talk about, if this happens, if that happens. But when it's like, you've got rent due, on the 1st, and you've been putting money and time into this thing and it's not delivering, then you make a very different decision, even if like, yeah, well, in theory this is supposed to work. It's not working, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely don't want to be limited to money too.
Sure.
Like, you don't want to have to take certain things because you need money.
Yeah, you make very, very different decisions when you're solely thinking about, or when you feel like you have to, right? Because you've got some financial deadline that's looming way too close.
Yeah.
And I think it makes you. There's probably two ends of that spectrum, right? But I've noticed that I make much better decisions when I don't feel that pressure, or if that pressure is like really, really close. But that's a dangerous game, right? It's like you can either sort of, sometimes when the pressure is really close, you make that Hail Mary pass and it works. But the risk there is it's just too stressful. It's too much anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think one of the reasons that you see successful people getting more and more successful is because the more space they have, the better they can make decisions because they're not stressed out about that decision.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
On to the next one. What about fitness and working out and stuff? Do you work out at the gym? Do you just specifically do, because you do straps and handstands, right?
Man, my fitness life has been all over the place. So when I injured myself years ago, I also got into personal training and like bodybuilding and that stuff because it was one of the few things I could do. It was controlled enough that I didn't have to worry about re-injuring. So for a long time, I was super like gym 5-6 days a week, nutrition, meal plan, counted the calories, did all of that stuff.
Me too.
I even did some like physique competitions, and I was in good shape. I couldn't move very well, but I was strong and I looked good. But my draw towards the physical stuff was always more artistically based, right? It was more the performing and the storytelling and all of that stuff. So at some point I realized that, it's funny, there's sort of this balance. Like, there are performers out there who move amazing and look incredible.
Yeah.
And I actually don't know how they do it, because the activities that really benefit the way I move are not necessarily the activities that have the effect on the way that I look.
Yeah, definitely not the ways in the gym.
Yeah.
I find that if I lift a lot of weights and I'm doing like bulky workouts, like a lot of bench press and that kind of stuff, I come back and if I'm doing trample or something, I'm moving a little slower and I'm not necessarily as good. Yeah. Especially I remember when I was I was working at Gold's Gym, I was taking all these supplements, training for like physique competitions, hadn't really performed in a while, and then I got a gig. And I got there, and I was like 20 pounds heavier than I was the last time. And I was just stacked on muscle, and I couldn't move at all. I was so slow.
Yeah, you're sore all the time.
Yeah.
And for me, injuries, I always end up getting injured more. I think because, you're worn out, your body's worn out because it's overextending itself, and that extra weight. Like, I'm not a big guy, right? So you put 20 pounds of muscle on me, and it's like my body's not really designed to move with that. And I think that's also specific to what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't. You have to know what you're really going for. And I think at first, when I got into all this stuff, I was trying to do too many things at once, right? Like, I didn't know, do I want to be a bodybuilder or do I want to be a hand balancer? Well, if you look at the best hand balancers, they're not bodybuilders. Now, there are those three guys out there that can do it. I don't know. Either they're magic or there's something else going on, but for me, it was always kind of one path or the other. What I do now is I sort of cycle through. So like right now, I'm really focused on the hand balancing because it's just where my attention is. So I go to the gym when I feel like it, for like weights and stuff, which isn't very often, maybe a couple times a week. But I do train handstand every day, sometimes multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Right. as long as I'm doing that, I don't have to focus so much on the diet. Like, I still eat clean and healthy, but I know that if I'm being that active, the nutrition, it's more just about eating whole foods, and I don't have to pay that close of attention to it.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm not training as much, I got to focus a little more on the diet. Or if I have a show coming up and I want to look a little better, then yeah, I relax on the technique training. I go to the gym. I eat a little more. So it's just knowing what you want, and then of course how to get there. Which that's just comes with time and research, man.
Yeah.
I had to become a personal trainer to learn how to affect my own body.
Yeah.
Yeah,
personal training courses were like the greatest thing I ever did for myself. I never made much money at personal training because it was always a side gig for me, but just the knowledge of knowing how my body works and how to recover and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Like I took all of the NASM courses, and like just taking those, even though they were expensive and I didn't really make much money on the back end.
Yeah.
I'll always know how to recover my body, how my body works, injury prevention, and all that good stuff. And I find that for like optimal performance, especially as an acrobat, my favorite thing to do is wake up, go to the gym. But when I go to the gym, I'm only doing like one of every workout just to warm up my body.
Mm-hmm.
And then also my mind and everything's going first thing in the morning. And then like later when I go to do flips or something, like I've already ran through all those ranges of motion. My body's fully warmed up and I'm like gonna perform a lot more optimally.
Yeah.
Rather than if I went and I did a huge workout or something and I did a lot of squats, I'm not gonna perform very well that later the next day.
You have to know your body's limitations, and it is at first you have to push those limitations.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're an athlete and you've been doing this for a while, you know where they are. Actually, I had an amazing coach. He was one of my rehab guys when I hurt my knee. And he said a good athlete knows how to push their limits, but a great athlete knows exactly where their limits are.
Yeah, when to stop.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's, again, theoretical knowledge versus actual experience. I think that's something that you build for yourself over time.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Like, because there's so many components. There's the strength training side. There's the technique training. There's the nutrition. There's the psychological side. I mean, for me, I've now the past couple of years, because I've been doing this now almost 10 years, maybe a little more, I've started to really understand what people talk about when they talk about like mindset when it comes to body. Like, I understand now that every day, if I'm training every day in one particular mindset, it's going to affect the outcome over time than if I'm training every day in a different one.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas I might have understood that in theory years ago, but I haven't been able to actually put it into practice until now. And I think a big part of that is because I also took care of all the physical stuff first. So I understand like the logistics, right? Like I understand, I need to eat this way and train this way for optimal results. But now it's like, and I need to think this way for even more optimal results.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And like recovery is like so big. That's another thing I go to the gym for. It's usually I'll go to the gym to warm up in the morning, and then I'll go like super late at night and I'll sit in the sauna and I'll stretch and I'll do decompression stuff, and that's just so big for how you recover. Like I'll always put money into my recovery, and I bought like a super expensive massage chair, but honestly if I can use that thing every night before bed, my body's going to work a lot better. Yeah, for sure. Go for it. So have you tried like all the diets, and like what do you think is like the optimal diet
Yeah, for sure.
for performing and mindset and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I have.
Because that's a huge
if it
thing.
exists, I have tried it. So a little bit of background. Like I said, I grew up unathletic and uncoordinated, and I was very, very skinny as a kid.
Me too.
Like almost malnourished, skinny, and so I had no muscle mass, and I also had no like real physical athletic ability. So my first goal with fitness and all of that was mostly just to look like a normal person, and then I figured if I could do that, then sure, it would be nice to like actually look like I worked out and have muscle and all that stuff. So, I tried every program and thing, everything from P90X to like the bodybuilding stuff, and I would buy nutrition calculators and all this stuff. I realized that every body has so many individual variables that there's definitely not a one size fits all approach.
Definitely.
Right. One of the most helpful things that I came across early on, I was lucky, was, and it's been a while since I've used the term, so I'm sorry if I get these wrong, but I'm sure you're familiar with like the endomorph, exomorph thing, right? Like really simple. The speed of your metabolism is a huge, huge factor, right? So if you're not paying attention to your diet, right, for 3 weeks and you naturally gain weight, that means it's a very different process than if somebody doesn't pay attention to their diet for 3 weeks and they lose weight. Right? So when I was younger, not as much now, but when I was younger, if I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing, I would lose weight. And that was because my metabolism was super, super fast. So for me, what ended up needing to happen was a combination of heavy weightlifting to build the stronger muscle fibers, right? And eating a shit ton of food, right? And now the quality of food is also another factor, right? So there's the quantity, which was 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day. You know, for a person who was 140 pounds, that's a lot of food, right? And that's eating it in 5-6 times a day. So basically, I was spending my entire life eating. That was just to like look normal, right? Yeah. And that seems like so extreme, but it was just because of the way my metabolism functioned. But if somebody, who's always been a little on the heavier side came to me and was like, well, how should I eat as a performer? I would not tell them to do that
definitely.
I don't really know where I was going with that, but yeah, so I think taking the time to educate yourself more than anything is the best thing, and then not being afraid to try something out, because I think there are so many people out there with such strong opinions about diet. And at the end of the day, the only thing that I'm interested in is the result, right? Yeah. So like, let's talk about like the vegan vegetarian thing, right? Like I've heard arguments on both sides of that are so convincing, and people are so adamant about their beliefs in those systems. And I actually, for a really long time, didn't think that there was much credit to like the vegan thing or the vegetarian thing, only because most of my background had been from bodybuilding, and that whole world is like, it's lean proteins, the idea of not eating meat is just like a terrible idea, right? Yeah. But about a year ago, I had just like not been paying close attention. I'd gained a little more weight. My metabolism's slower because I'm older now. It wasn't a lot of weight, but I just noticed like, oh, like I don't really look the way I want to, and I was performing, so if I'm taking my shirt off in front of thousands of people, I want to look as good as I can. And somehow it went through my mind like, you know what, I've never tried going full vegan, right? And so I decided to do it just for it was like a few weeks, primarily because I have some really amazing performer friends who are vegan. Their bodies don't look like insane, but their skill level is through the roof, right? And it's something that I've noticed, like a lot of really, really talented performers are vegan. So I was like, fuck it, I'll try it just to see what happens, And yeah, man, in like 3 weeks, I leaned up faster than I've ever done in my life, right? But then what I noticed is after about 3 weeks, I started to lose a lot of energy. Yep. So it's just knowing like what does what. Right? Yeah. And where you are and where you need to go. I don't know. Maybe that's a whole roundabout answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've tried every diet that you could possibly think of. I was on the straight bodybuilder diet, eating like 6 or 7 times a day, waking up, oatmeal, like forcing meals down my throat. Yeah. Then I went vegan for almost a year. That same kind of thing. I leaned up real quick. I also lost a lot of muscle mass, and then doing summer shows, I eventually started running out of energy. Yeah. My roommate Mason is vegan though, and he seems to be thriving. So can't really say much bad about it. And then I went from that to like almost the polar opposite, which was keto. Keto, I found that my brain functioned extremely well. Like I was always full of energy because you don't have those ups and downs from eating carbs. Right. Yeah. Performance, like I didn't notice too much of a difference. I definitely noticed that I would always be like trying to drink coffee or something to get energy because I wasn't eating those carbs. But eventually that went away. And I would probably say that was like the best diet that I've done. Really? And then like a year later, which is pretty recently, I did the carnivore diet because I was like, it seems a little crazy, but I kind of want to do it. And that one, I didn't like get the same kind of like mind and focus energy that I had on keto.
Sure.
But I did slim up quite a bit. Definitely did have the diarrhea. Definitely like felt really powerful though, because I was getting so many amino acids.
Right,
But I think it's I mean, I liked just testing out everything. If I could stay strictly on one, I would definitely do keto.
Oh yeah.
But it's just so hard to like.
Yeah.
You can't go out and eat, and it's super inconvenient
right.
to eat so much fats and stuff.
Yeah, it's 100% trial and error, and also not being afraid. Like, I think there are people out there. They're like, oh, like what if I die? Like, what if I change what I'm eating for a week and it kills me? It's like, consult your doctor first, obviously, but I just don't think you're gonna know right away. Like if you've been eating a certain way for 2 weeks and you feel like crap, like then don't do that.
Yeah.
But if you don't, then keep messing with it so that you actually understand how it affects you personally. And also I think another side of it is the psychological factor. It's right. Yeah, maybe eating this way will allow you to look amazing, but if you're exhausted all the time, or you're angry all the time, or you just don't feel like yourself, like maybe it's not worth it, right? Because I think we assume that people are much more critical of, especially as performers, are much more critical of the way we look than they actually are, right? Like if you're a professional athlete and you're in relatively good shape, you're talking about the difference between being in the top, 15% of human bodies to the top 1%.
Yeah.
And I think what's more important is like the sustainability factor, right? Like, are you in a position where you're not going to get injured, where you feel good, where you can perform multiple times a week without it affecting you physically or psychologically? So for me, I think that's more the goal now. It's the sustainability. It's like,
yeah,
look, maybe I don't get to be the most freaking ripped guy on stage, but if I'm happy more, then I'll take that. And if I'm still getting paid and I'm still, able to book gigs, then until somebody says, hey, you're fat, and we're not going to hire you until that changes. Like, I'm more thinking about the sustainability and the happiness factor.
Yeah, definitely. And diet is like a huge thing. If you're putting all your energy into being vegan or keto or bodybuilding or something, that's like that's like 20% of your energy is like, what can I eat? Oh, I can't eat this and that kind of stuff. Right. So it's about finding a good sustainable diet. And then I found like when I was vegan, I was much more calm and nice. And then when I was on carnivore diet, I did find myself to get irritable quite a bit, and I was like, maybe that makes sense. I'm kind of like a cat versus like a deer or something.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I remember watching this some nature documentary, and they were talking about how bears have this like salmon feeding season, and it's so funny because they're all like, they've been eating berries and stuff all year, and they go up to the river and they eat all this salmon, and they go from like being like these really lazy, slow things to all of a sudden they're just like crazy energy and like fighting with each other and all this stuff, and from the protein from the salmons. And for whatever reason, I was like, I'm just gonna eat salmon for a week and see what happens. And it's amazing what putting in your body, how that will affect everything. And then also thinking about, like, I don't know, I almost think about it strategically now. It's like, what's going on in my life? Like, how could that be of advantage or not to me right now? It's like, if I know that I have some sort of high pressure job coming up, like, it actually might be helpful for me to put more protein in my diet just so I am a little more sharp, a little more aggressive. But if it's like my vacation, like, okay, I'll go vegan and I can just actually relax for the next couple of weeks. It's interesting how these things can affect you.
Yeah, definitely. Last topic that I wrote down was what's your favorite show you've seen, and like what do you think is like the best show out there?
As far as like Cirque stuff goes?
Cirque stuff, or it could be completely unrelated to Cirque.
Definitely. Let's see, man. There's a lot.
Although no show, I've never seen a show that compared to Cirque that wasn't like because Cirque has like the music and the performing.
They have everything.
And then like if you go to a music festival or something, you're only seeing half of it.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Let me see. I am a big fan of Curios.
Curious. I haven't seen that one yet.
The visuals are very cool. I've always been into like the steampunk aesthetic, and I like it because they made it a little more like golden eye, like Golden Compass meets
Yeah.
meets steampunk. I thought that was a really amazing show. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to pick a best. I think every show has its moments. Like I remember and sometimes it's so funny. Sometimes it's the things that aren't even like the acrobatic that really get me. It's the visuals. Like which one is it? I think it's Ka, where they're falling in the water. When they like right after the fight scene.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's so simple. They're just turning on harnesses really slow with like a projection of some water bubbles.
Yeah.
But with the music and the timing and the way they do it, it's like it's so powerful. And most circus shows have those handful of moments that are just so incredible. Favorite circus show? That's a hard one, man. What's yours? I'm curious.
I personally like Volta just because it has both of my disciplines, ramps and trampoline in it.
Yep.
I always I wasn't impressed by MJ or like Love. I like the 2 acts, like
Yep.
trampoline, and like there's a few other acts, like, but there's so much effects that it kind of like blows it out for me, and like there's too much dancing and downtime and stuff. And personally, like I'm like an adrenaline junkie. I don't like watching dancing too much unless it's like a soloist or something. But when it's like choreographed dance routines or something, I'm not too into it. But I would say like O is really good just because it's mostly raw talent.
Yep. Actually, yeah. I think production value wise,
it's huge.
Takes the cake. It's just
yeah,
and it's beautiful. Its aesthetic is so cool. Actually, I think really the answer to that question is I'm a fan of the older school shows. Corteo, I think that's how it's pronounced. Corteo. That was like one of the first that I ever saw. Or Kidam. Those like original old school circ shows when they still were a little more raw.
Yeah.
And they weren't relying so much on the technology. And I think that those were the shows that defined circ, because what they did is, without all of the extra bells and whistles, they were so good at storytelling, right? And they were so outside of the box at the time. And with something as simple as some makeup and an umbrella, they just created this imagery that had never been seen before.
Yeah.
And the circ still does that, but they do it by throwing a bunch of money at some crazy prop.
Yeah.
Whereas like when it's like, all right, guys, we got 5 people, and let's think of something that nobody's ever seen before. And I mean, I guess I didn't see a lot of European circus before circ, but like I don't know, did they were they the people who came up with the person like walking slowly upside down across the stage? Like if you've never seen that before, you feel like you're in a dream, but you're awake, and it's a really powerful thing that they're able to do. Some of those earlier shows.
Yeah, I feel like maybe back in the day it used to be, here's our act and here's the way we can create visuals around it, and nowadays it's like, here's this visual that we have and let's put performers in it.
Yeah.
And it kind of waters it down a little bit. Like Cirque just kind of leans just too much towards the visual effects and that kind of stuff nowadays.
Right. And I think, and maybe it's just we're biased as performers, but I think that's just it. Like we want to see the act be like, the act is the reason that I go to the show, and then and then it's everything that supports it. Now those things supporting it can be absolutely phenomenal. Like I'm all for that. But yeah, when it starts to be just about the effects, the other side of that is when it's just about the effects, then everyone suddenly becomes a generalist.
Everyone's a generalist.
And now the company can start getting away with paying people a whole lot less.
Yeah. I feel like a good example of that is Cobb, because the whole thing's based around this crazy expensive stage that they built. And there's not too many like specialists in that show. It's mostly just a bunch of generalists, and you could sub them in and out.
Yeah, which is great for the performance community if the company understands the value of those performers and is like, hey, like I don't know, it's almost like I wish the system was set up so that you get paid based on what you're capable of doing, not just what they actually have you doing. It's like, yeah,
that's true.
Like actually as an artist, right? Like I charge a premium. So I'm a fine artist and I also do graphic design, right? I still charge a premium for my graphic design because I have the fine arts skill.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you go to Fiverr and just hire some random person, like yeah, they can do the same job that you're hiring me for, but because they don't have that added skill, like there's probably going to be some slight differences in quality at the end of the day. And so I think it's reasonable to charge more because of that. It's the same thing. Like yeah. So they didn't need your solo act in the show, but if your solo act is good and all they're having you do is be a generalist, like they need to pay you for what you're capable of as well.
Yeah, I find that too as well. Like probably like my last year of doing this all wheels show, I realized like okay, so they would pay me a certain amount to do the act that I was doing, but I'm also capable of doing everything on the stage.
Right.
And in that last year, I ended up doing everything on the stage. Like, and I was like, man, I got like signed up to do one certain thing, and then next thing you know, I'm doing everything on the stage, but for the same pay as like what I like. They negotiated the same rate, but I was also capable of doing everything. And you never know when you're going to need to, if someone gets hurt and then you sub in, then yeah.
And actually, you know, I should almost flip that. I shouldn't say that it's the company's responsibility, because look, they're a business just like we have businesses, right? And they have to make cost-effective decisions, or else the whole thing doesn't exist. So I respect that and understand that. I really think that the burden falls on the performers to be educated, to understand the system beyond just themselves, so that they actually understand that like they need to be charging more for this thing. Like yes, this particular skill anyone could do, but in this environment, like you need to understand the actual value that you're bringing, because today they're hiring you to do the simple part, but they know what you're capable of. And if you get hired in at base rate and then all of a sudden in 6 months you're doing 20 other things but still getting paid base rate, like you have to be savvy enough to right off the bat be like, understand, like, okay, I'll do this for this base rate, but you need me to do one more thing, like that's a renegotiation, because my skill set is beyond what you've hired me for.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It never hurts to like pitch a higher number when someone offers you a rate. Like when I hire someone, they go with the first time, I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
But like there's all you have to do is mention like, oh, I'd like to get paid this much, and that could get you more money, which could make you happier down the line.
Definitely.
But the negotiation process is huge, because you could get screwed and do that for the same amount that you agreed to, and like, man, I should have done this for more money.
Yeah. And also I think it's important for performers, like, look, if you just want to be an artist, you know, and your goal in life wasn't to be a master negotiator, like, of course I respect that, but it's sort of a twofold thing. One, if you're working for yourself, you're going to have to learn to negotiate. The other side of it is business owners, companies, they're used to negotiations. It's their lives are just one giant negotiation, right? So I think a lot of performers, they're afraid that, oh, if I step up and talk, you know, and start a conversation about pay, I'm going to lose my job or whatever. It's like, no, if you approach it from a value-based perspective, so don't say, hey, I need more money. Just go and say, hey, how can I add more value so that you have a good reason to spend more on me?
Yep.
Right? And any good business that you want to be working for understands that conversation and is going to be willing to have it, because they actually want that too, right? They want to make more money, and if you can bring more value to their company, then they have a reason to pay you more.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? It's not just arbitrary. Like there are certain factors that actually determine why companies pay what they do to people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you want to wrap it up right there? That
yeah, man.
concludes my list.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for coming on. Everyone can find you at ben.lerman.
Benjamin.lerman on Instagram, and then my new YouTube is also Benjamin.lerman, and the podcast that I'm working on right now is called Art Thrive Academy.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on again. And if you guys watch this entire thing, comment down below. Let us know what you guys want to hear in the next one. Definitely go follow Ben. And thank you guys. Subscribe if you haven't. Peace out. Stay safe.